Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be chairing this amazing panel to looking at how the technology is reshaping the efficiency of the sector. So we could see over the years, especially last 10 years, that there's a huge change regarding to the technology, especially after 2008 crisis was something that shifted the interest and implementing on that. And there was a lot of new players coming into the market looking for the FinTech companies. But another aspect that is actually changing is the way how, if you think about your kids or your teenager kids or your cousins are thinking, they behave different. They are not need so much interaction face-to-face. So we have this aspect that almost 2/3 of our times, we as adults spending on the internet, and our kids actually spending more. So actually it's moving us that there will be a change and they will be using more this type of the technology that allowing them to interact, not actually through the way how we used to interact. So we have two very nice people who are going to speak on that panel. First of all, I would like to introduce John Wilson, who is a managing director and of the UK Ever, and he will say a few words about himself.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yes, so John Wilson, I'm the Managing Director of Avaloq for UK and Ireland. Avaloq, as I'm sure you're aware, are a leading wealth management and banking software and services company. We deploy our core product and standalone digital products, either on-prem, SaaS or BPaaS, and we work with over 150 clients globally across Switzerland, Europe, and also Asia-Pac.
There are another person who is introducing is Nick Rosser. He's the head of the information technology for Sander House. If you could say a few words.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick Rosser, Head of Information Technology at Saunderson House. We're a wealth management firm based in the city, just around the corner actually. And we are around about 200 people strong, managing around about 5 billion of assets. Recently been acquired by Rathbones, which is an exciting opportunity for us. And we are servicing a number of clients across both our discretionary and advisory services. So yes, looking forward to talking about this in further detail.
We would like to invite you for our discussion. If you would like to ask any questions, please use the Brella app. And you have to go on the bottom toolbar, and then you have to click 3 dots, and that should really lead you that you can ask the questions. So I will have all the questions from coming here. So the idea we had here that we will have some kind of a leading question first to kind of start the discussion, and then we would love to hear the questions from you and from audience as well. So one of the things and aspects I think it's important to look at it is there's a lot of legal changes happening. So one of the things I think it will be very interesting to see it. Normally, like the legal changes, and we try to implement any innovation that is causing a problem. So what do banks or financial institution needs to do overcome any type of the legal issues to be able to generate new technology? So Nick, what do you think?
I think for us, I think the legal and regulatory side of things can sit very closely together. So I think for us overall, it is around thinking around what we can achieve from a business outcome perspective, associated with thinking around all of these areas and process efficiencies in particular, but ultimately making sure that they're done in a legally and compliant fashion. So I think it's looking at those overall areas across operational efficiency through to working with the appropriate teams who've got that specialist knowledge associated with the contractual requirements and regulatory requirements. So we're not doing anything that essentially leaves us exposed.
John, any of your thoughts?
From a legal perspective?
Yeah, and then information of the technology.
Okay, so in terms of the legal perspective, obviously we work with clients across the world, and we are subject to regulatory constraints and restrictions that are kind of particular to those different areas, and we work within them. What's common across those are some of the integration challenges that those clients face, and certainly from an AI perspective, which again I think can at times kind of stretch the boundaries. I guess in the edge cases, at the worst case of the of GDPR and data issues, the integration challenges that we see there across those firms are many and diverse. So we always would recommend to those clients, first of all, to make sure that they have got senior commitment, because undertaking any AI and integration challenge is definitely kind of organisational wide, and without that senior commitment, certainly the complexity and the cost of these things can't be underestimated. So it certainly requires senior commitment from that perspective. And then it's a case, I guess, of looking at it from the perspective of the user. So we would always recommend taking very kind of user-centric use cases that look at the different personas across the value chain, whether it's a relationship manager, whether it's middle office, whether it's compliance, again, going to the kind of the heart of the legal and reg challenge, to make sure that you understand what are the key outcomes that those different personas are looking for, and making sure that in your strategic AI roadmap that you've effectively ordered it in line with those priorities, whether those priorities be growth, risk management, compliance management, efficiencies, etc. And then beyond that, it's a case of making sure that you've assembled the right kind of resources. And these can be, of course, going from the kind of the bottom to top. Infrastructure, cloud is an amazing enabler for AI and data. Making sure you've got the right platform there to make sure that you can ingest and process and rationalize and normalize a large volume of varying structured and unstructured data sources. Making sure you've got the right data sources themselves, and then key enablers such as APIs, and then not forgetting, of course, the human resources such as the data scientists, data engineers, business analysts, delivery teams that are required to deliver on these things.
So it seems like one of the very complex.
It's a hugely complex area.
Yeah. So one of the things that is interesting is what are some of the existing technology solutions being used to transform investing. We know that we already covered the aspects of the legal aspects. So what will be existing technology which are being used now, which are allowing us to transferring how they're investing and how it's happening, based on your experience?
I'll comment first, if you like. So I think overall for me, I think it's around from a business perspective, getting using technologies which align to what you are trying to achieve. And by that, I'm talking around the business objectives as much as looking at the overall essential commodities that are needed to drive your business forward. It's not always best, I feel, to necessarily be at the bleeding edge. I think that's very much so around a business strategic decision that you need to make associated with what you're trying to achieve. And therefore, sometimes it's more appropriate to use something which is established. You are going to be the only people who are going to know about your business and ultimately what applications you've got, and ultimately how you can utilize those integrated technologies where it's necessary to ultimately drive forward business efficiency. Now, sometimes that can be a consolidated solution that comes through from a host of, from one vendor. Sometimes it can be about cherry picking the most appropriate vendor for what your needs are. So you need to understand very clearly what your business case is and what your business drivers are in order to make sure you are selecting the right types of technologies to support that.
Well, look, as a technology vendor, I'm going to give a somewhat of a partisan answer and then a non-partisan answer as well, which I guess everyone would expect. From a kind of a partisan perspective, I think some of the interesting technology opportunities lie in some of our standalone digital products, all of which have got a heavy reliance on AI. And actually, across the kind of the various panels and presentations this morning, I've heard a number of these themes mentioned. So, our conversational banking app, Engage, our data platform, Insights, which allows kind of ingestion of huge volumes of data and then kind of processing that to serve up insights. And also kind of the recommend technologies which exist within our portfolio management tool, Wealth, again, kind of all of which are heavily reliant on AI. I think looking forward, maybe the kind of the non-partisan approach, I think some of the kind of more exciting kind of technology opportunities would lie in things like hyper-personalization, which I've heard mentioned several times today. For example, taking not just kind of news feeds, but kind of key news articles that would go to a client, and they would be absolutely served up relevant to that client's interests. Some next action type technologies, so natural language processing and chatbots serving up what would be the logical next action from a client, understanding their requirements. Intent detection, so hovering over any kind of aspect on a page, making sure that kind of AI is jumping in to interpret what a client is interested in, and therefore kind of serving up where we think you're going to go there, we think you're going to go there, giving them options in that sort of space. I've already talked about recommends in terms of making sure that you can, or the applications using AI can interpret a client's requirements and then serve up kind of portfolio recommendations and instrument recommendations, which are highly tuned to that. Predictive analytics, which I think everyone in the room has probably had some experience of, making sure that you can kind of manage peaks and troughs. And then finally, the key enablers such as APIs. You know, we're going to live in a best-of-breed microservices world. Those APIs are going to be critical to make sure that we can all consume data from a variety of different data sources and can move into the bright new future together.
So it's mean that mainly the data will be something that will leading us in a certain way, how we are using and implementing the technology. I find it very interesting you mentioned about the chat box. I have to say personal experience with my students is every time I'm lecturing and we have this online lecture, which is not like face-to-face here, the only way how they communicate is through the chat box. It's question, you can get like, and it's really interesting to see the difference between my generation and their generation. So I think that is something that would definitely change the way how we communicate, definitely with, in the future.
Yeah, but I think generally in terms of communication channels, I think what you're highlighting there is we need to be flexible. There's no point in terms of us focusing just in terms of one dynamic. We've got different generations who work in very, very different ways. I know if I try and speak to my children, even if they're in the same room as me, forget it. But you message them and they respond straight back. My wife's the opposite way round, so that's always a good thing. But it does demonstrate that the importance of being flexible in relation to the way that we communicate for people's personal preferences, their different demographics, their technical experiences is really important to build into whatever we are doing. And that applies as much to our internal stakeholders as it does to our clients.
So another kind of coming from what we have talked is mainly a data. So one of the aspects we are talk quite a lot is about artificial intelligence, and we know that artificial intelligence needs much more of the data as possible in order to be properly implemented, because we analyzing the human's behavior, which is unpredictable very often, as you pointed out with example of your kids. So what challenges have financial institutions face connecting all these databases? How they can overcome that? What is your opinion?
Would you like me to take that one first?
Go for it.
Yes,
Okay.
please go, John.
I mean, I think it's a multi-dimensional problem because, I mean, as has been mentioned several times in discussions this morning, I mean, data is ubiquitous and varied and structured and unstructured. So, I mean, I'd kind of boil it down into, I guess, kind of four key challenge areas. So first of all is in terms of connecting kind of various data sources. One of the problems is some of that data is going to be structured, some of it's going to be unstructured. So whether it's structured or unstructured, you've got to clean that, you've got to normalize it, you've got to rationalize it. And then not only that, you've also then got to be able to process that and then kind of present the insights in such a way that they're actually going to add some kind of value. You know, if you're getting in information around relationships or preferences, and you know, part of that's coming in as a result of voice communications, multilingual kind of voice communications. Then you're going to need some kind of graphical interface and kind of scoring capabilities in your terms of presentation mechanisms that are going to be able to have to make sense of that. So clearly there's the unstructured, structured debate. Then there's the question of volume. So, and conversely, that can kind of really kind of take kind of two different channels. You can either have too much volume, in which case, you know, you need a lot of processing power, perhaps relying on the cloud to be able to manage that and to make sense of it, or even too little, because I mean, there might be 50 million millionaires out there in the world or 500 million mass affluent. However, how many wealth managers are actually going to have access to all that sort of information? Even the big players, the UBSs or what have you, you know, when you start breaking down their client base by demographic, by geography, by preference, by gender, or you know, whatever, you then start getting into kind of much smaller categories. and you start to question, well, have you got the right kind of sample sizes to start drawing conclusions? Of course, you can extrapolate, but then you're into the world of assumption. One of the things that we do at Avaloq is go down a deep learning path. So we like to serve up our clients obfuscated insights from across our BPAS community. So we've got over 150 clients, and if we can obfuscate their data and take the key data insights without obviously revealing the data, then users of our insight platform get access to a far greater sample pool. So therefore dealing with that, the kind of the problem of not enough volume. You then got the issue of timelines when you're connecting data sets. You're going to have to work between real-time data, which is, of course, is essential if you're going to be making kind of instantaneous decisions, or if you're in the business of predictive analytics, then you've got to kind of work through your kind of various batch interfaces. And as I said earlier, it's really that kind of visualization challenge, I think, will be challenge number 4. So I think kind of the challenges across connecting those various different data sets are many and various, but those 4 categories I think will be key for me.
I think especially in the context about you have different type of the data, structure and unstructured, in order to merge this data, that is one thing, and another one to read and cluster this data, regarding to what type of the information you need. That definitely will require, as you mentioned before, a lot of time and resources that definitely the financial institution has to be facing if they want to go forward. So, based on your opinion and experience, do you think it is possible that the markets will move forwards portfolio which will be entirely managed by artificial intelligence, or there will be always a space for this human touch aspect that we as a people we should be involved in this decision making?
Happy to go first. Yeah, can do. So I think for me, certainly where we are today, and I think it touches on what was being mentioned actually in the previous session, is around the evolutionary step that we are in and where we're looking in relation to the target market if we're trying to get out to the end client in relation to the value proposition that we're looking at here. I think ultimately if you're looking at the mass market and trying to achieve that, then the level of value that an advisor can bring to that process may start to reduce, and the cost profile may mean that it's impacted to a higher level. When you start to look at the higher touch services and maybe the higher net worth individuals who want to still have that element of personal touch, I think then the level of value starts to mean that the personal touch starts to become even more important and imperative. And I think actually we can probably look at some of the lessons that have been taken out of some of the other industries, and certainly during lockdown. If we look at something like a GP, prior to lockdown, we would all go in and see our GP on a face-to-face level, and it worked really, it worked. It was just what we did, it's what we felt most comfortable with 99 times out of 100. Now, that's almost flipped on its head. A GP surgery doesn't really want to see anybody at the moment. As any of you would have known if you've been to a GP in the last 18 months or so, everything is done through remote service, through telephone, email, or some other mechanism wherever possible. And we've almost come to adapt to that because we've been forced to. Will our advice proposition move in the same way in the future? Possibly. Amazon, when we first started to do online shopping, we were speaking about that earlier, was it normal to be going all your shopping online 20 years ago? Absolutely not. Did you used to do it a little bit and feel maybe a little bit uncomfortable about it? Yes, probably. But now, nobody will think twice, whether they're using a mobile app, whether they're using an online service. And will that impact in relation to financial advice in the future? Probably. And I think we are definitely in the midst of that journey.
I think Nick makes some really interesting points there, and it kind of I reflect on, we can all offer opinions, but you offer opinions based on kind of what you understand now. I mean, Nick's just kind of contrasted, where we are now through, after having a period of accelerated evolution through the pandemic, compared to where we were then. So could it go kind of fully automated, fully AI, fully robo in the years to come? I mean, yes, it could. I mean, I think that there are always edge cases, and I think as we progress, then our tolerance for change, well, what has changed now, what is kind of normal in the future, can obviously, kind of increases exponentially. Right here, right now, though, I think kind of the common view, and I think is a reasonable view that will hold for certainly 5 years, let's say, is that AI is there to augment as opposed to fully replace the human touch. And I think that's been kind of the popular view throughout the conference this morning, and I would agree with that. Why? Well, let's look at a kind of data-driven view of that. I mean, Avaloq did a survey quite recently, and of those 200 or so individuals surveyed across about 150 institutions, we found that over 60% of the client base were not comfortable engaging with pure robo advice. Now, there's always edge cases, so that means 40% were, or 30 to 40% were. But of those surveyed, over 70% believed that AI, automation, robo-advising were the kind of development areas to watch over the course of the next 5 years. So I think right here, right now, a hybrid solution is the one that works, and I think we'll see, the kind of the balance between human and machine maybe kind of change over the course of the next 5 years. And I think that will be accelerated as well by, it's been spoken about this morning already, kind of generational wealth transfer. As the millennials and Gen Zs, and I don't know where we go after Gen Zs, but there'll be another generation after that. As the generational wealth transfer happens and advisors are progressively dealing with digital natives, they want things right here, right now, can't wait, won't wait, and it's real time is the important thing. We've tried to respond to that with our Engage app, and that allows RMs to fully engage with their client base in a very kind of personalized way, so supported by all of the information that's in obviously our core app, or kind of whatever core app the advisor is using, but enables very safe either kind of WeChat or WhatsApp type messaging to enable very kind of direct and immediate messaging with clients. So, and I think Alex demonstrated this morning the number of the different AI plugins which are in that. So clearly it's becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of the tool set that an advisor is using, but I think right here, right now, it's an augmentation tool as opposed to a replacement tool.
When I'm looking at that like three perspectives. One is preferences. So what preferences we have regarding to managing our portfolio by using any type of the technology. And another aspect is education. So how we are educated. I'm talking about digital education. How we are comfortable with using different type of the devices. And how from I always look at the example of my grandmother. She's now 90, and when I moved to UK, the only way how I could communicate with her was through Skype. And she had to learn how to use it. She became so fluent with that after very short period, like 2 or 3 weeks. She was literally calling during my lectures, but I'm saying educations. And I think what Nick mentioned, which is a very good point, is environment. The way how we can see how people shift to using online banking because they were forced to do it. Mm-hmm. The COVID completely changed our environment. So that might happens here, we don't never know, what will happen in the future. It's, how much of the face-to-face interaction we will be able to have it. So I thank you very much. That's very interesting insight. So another thing which I worth to ask is has the artificial intelligence reached its full potential? It is true or not? It is anything that we could add it to it? What is your thoughts in that?
No. I think we're in the foothills of it right now, to be honest. I think there's a long way to go. At the minute, things like natural language processing, kind of chatbots, etc., are becoming commonplace. But we are transformation programs which require some reliance on AI are still massively complex, expensive affairs requiring very specialist knowledge. We're still kind of fishing from a relatively small pool in terms of those experts, and new solutions are coming up all the time. So, as I say, I think we're still at the foothills of this. There's a long way to go yet before AI reaches its zenith. And the further up the mountain we climb, the kind of the higher it's going to get, because there will always be new developments and new initiatives.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'd certainly echo a number of John's comments there and points. I think are very fairly made. I think for me, we are absolutely at the beginning of that journey, and I think arguably, maybe certainly in certain sections of wealth, maybe a little bit behind where some of the other sectors are. And I think what we need to do is to potentially learn from some of those sectors who have maybe taken this a little bit quicker and a little bit more advanced, maybe in terms of their thinking, maybe because they've got commercial needs to be. I think there's also some potential disruptors in the marketplace coming in here who could use this in a different way, because they're maybe working in different industries today. I think we've all been mindful for a long time in terms of who those companies may be, and I won't give them the branding opportunity now. But they are going to be thinking around how they can use the existing experience and knowledge and investment opportunities they've got in those spaces to disrupt. And wealth, investment management and the like are areas where it's lucrative. We know that, we work within the sector, and I'm sure they're going to want to tap into that at some stage. And this could be an area that they use as an opportunity to get in there. And I know there's a number of organisations and firms who already work within the sector who are using that as an opportunity to grow themselves appropriately in advance of that happening. But AI, early doors, absolutely early doors. And I think it's important as well to make sure you validate what you mean by AI. There's a lot of firms out there who are who are using the buzzword, but actually are arguably not delivering AI. So I make sure you do understand truly what you mean by AI, and you clarify that with who you're speaking with. That's probably my last passing thought.
When I was listening to you, I was actually thinking about augmented reality. So I remember 15 years ago when augmented reality was only used for the computer games. And everyone was saying it's too expensive, that it will be implemented in the real life, our normal life. And when we look at the prop tech companies now, they are literally, not even before the COVID, but with the COVID, they literally went with the real reality, because they were not able to show the house, they were not having, and they could actually, so it's and now I have one of my students who are actually looking how to implement the real, augmented real reality for his banking project. So I think it's it's changing. And the more we learn, the more technology is, I would say, a little bit cheaper as well. It's easier to implement, and then the people who are using that, they have more knowledge about it. That is, I completely agree. It's the first stage. I think we are in the first phase. So that is actually moving me to my other question. According to what you think to here, what is the most exciting future user case for artificial intelligence, which will shape the wealth management over the next 10 years?
Okay, well, you're asking the guy with kind of the greyest hair and the least of it on. I kind of perform a kind of futurist, to give a futurist view. So I'm maybe not the kind of the best qualified for that. So I mean, I'd go with the the evolution, not revolution view. And I think I'm probably safe in that for 5 years. I don't know if I can stretch that for 10. But I think some of the interesting things which are available now, which are to be further exploited, would be hyper-personalisation. But I think hyper-personalisation very much in mass market, because that's an untapped area. And I think the more that we can hyper-personalise there, the more that we can engage individuals in that sector or in that demographic, to get engaged in investing for the future and saving, then I think that's great untapped opportunity for both them and also for the wealth management firms themselves. We're in an age of passive investing, are we not? So if AI is to live up to its potential, then we have to be able to exploit kind of the infinite range of data sources out there to be able to generate the kind of insights that we need, such that active investing can start to demonstrate worth, fight back against kind of passive investing, and with the right kind of insights, the right kind of algorithms, the right kind of views, start to beat the market. I think there's a case for smarter AI, so having engagement with chatbots, we talked about it earlier, that are more human, give them more of a human experience. And I don't mean anything sinister by that, but I think there's, there's kind of nuance which AI and chatbots are yet to get. I was reading an interesting article in the Guardian yesterday, which I guess kind of that would mean kind of AI would start serving me up all sorts of more kind of liberal data sets, which I try and confuse by also reading the Telegraph as well on occasion. But I was reading an article yesterday about an AI called I think it was Delphi or Adelphi. And a variety of readers are trying to test that with kind of a number of different questions. And it did quite well on some, but on others it kind of failed catastrophically. One question was, is genocide okay? And I think the response was, yes, as long as everyone's happy, which I think it kind of missed the point there. So I think there's a bit of a way to go for chatbots. I think also kind of access to kind of greater, wider, deeper data pools and ease of being able to, rationalize and normalize them to kind of tap into insights. I think whereas informed as the questions that we ask, and if we, garbage in, garbage out, I know that's a kind of a pre-digital truism, but it remains the same, garbage in, garbage out. And then I'd look at kind of what's going to drive change, and I'd look at, it's the eternals of, growth, risk management, and kind of managing kind of compliance slash fraud. So in terms of growth, we've got to be able to better align investors' needs with opportunities. In terms of risk management, it's about taking some of the cost out and increasing the kind of the validity of controls, so avoiding things like kind of false negatives or false positives as we look through any alerts which might come up on client annual reviews or quarterly reviews. And then as the digital age takes hold, we've all seen it, kind of a massive uptick in digital fraud. So I think we're going to have to place heavy reliance on AI to be able to spot fraudsters, whether that's kind of the common or garden fraud, kind of phishing or what have you, but also kind of managing anti-money laundering. And that's where things like the graphical interfaces and the network diagrams that come out at the back end of artificial intelligence tools can spot not just kind of dodgy transactions, but kind of key accounts and key individuals where they sit in the relationship to be able to kind of pluck out the main offenders. So I think that there's a host of kind of future use cases there to work with.
I think especially when we look at the cryptocurrency assets or cryptocurrency asset investment, like there's a huge volatility going on, and any way how we could inform the investors about potential risk, for instance, of the option contracts and etc. It's not only money laundering, but as well the proper information to the people who are investing, what they actually are investing in and what the risk they are bearing. I think it's a good way. I would like now to move the questions from the audience, if you don't mind. So we have really interesting ones. Is the hybrid robo-advisor model the future for the retail investment?
I think for me, I go back to something I mentioned earlier. I think it's a mix. I think it's going to depend upon your individual business model. I think it's going to depend upon your individual client profile. And I think absolutely there will be those where it will be appropriate to be robo-advised, for want of putting it a better way. But there will also be those who still need, or it is appropriate because of the complexity of their financial circumstances, for it to be a person who is supported by this type of technology, and that process becomes more efficient as a result.
John, your thoughts?
I think absolutely. I mean, it's horses for courses. I mean, every wealth management firm is chasing, being able to add additional value to the client. They're chasing being able to grow, both in terms of assets under management and profitability, and they're looking to manage their cost base. And AI, digitization, those are all tools, absolutely, which kind of underpin those efforts. But all of those efforts are going to rely on creativity and expertise and relationships. And I think wealth management is always going to be exercise in relationship management. And, part of that can be handled by AI and digital enablement. And part of that can't be. So I think there's always got to be a human on the end of the phone or on the end of the Teams call or kind of the other end of the side of the table to be able to provide the types of services that the clients are going to need.
And some of the clients might want the human on the other side on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Want to have this interaction as well. So this is kind of writing to the trust that they have. So So I'm definitely in the line with you, Rob. So I would like to move to the second question. How do you think the leverage between the big data and the true artificial intelligence will revolutionize the client's experience in the wealth management firm? John, would you like to start?
I think I touched on this in some of my monologue earlier, which is, big data. Well, what is big data? Well, it's about getting in, truckloads of data from a variety of different data sources and normalizing that, rationalizing that to be able to interpret it. So the first challenge any wealth manager is going to have is in ingesting that data and creating the types of models they're going to need to be able to get insights. And then in terms of kind of the AI aspect of that, it's that big data is effectively the basic ingredients to be able to draw conclusions. So I think the relationship is of kind of supply and demand. I mean, artificial intelligence needs to be provided and fed data for it to be able to model and draw conclusions. So there's a clear kind of symbiosis, synergies between the two.
So I think it's kind of moving us to the other question. Are firms ready to support the rising demand for the digital assets? Do they need to implement new technology to meet these challenges? I don't know who.
I think again, for me, it will come back down to your individual business. I think it's very easy sometimes to fall behind in relation to technology. It's not the arms race, I don't think, in terms of progression. But I think it is important to make sure that you keep on top of what is going on and evolving within the space, and you move forward at the appropriate speed for your firm in relation to the investments that are available and for the clients and the market segment that you're trying to look after. Some of those will be incredibly technology heavy, therefore you will need to be at the bleeding edge of the delivery of the solutions that sit alongside that. Others will be more concerned around having a good, stable proposition that delivers a good investment return potentially for advisors. So I think there's a balance there to be hit.
Yeah, but I think it's like in the context about digital assets, because I think they are normally coming, many of them, especially like cryptocurrencies, like bitcoins and etc. They're coming with huge volatility that we have in the investment. Should we have something additional to kind of inform our customers that they are aware, some kind of technology, some kind of a selfie button that they can have, that, okay, this is dangerous, be aware, you can lose your money, your students, your kid might not get a, fund for education. So I think questions here is not generally, but actually with respect to the digital assets, because they are coming with a little bit different, maybe not, I don't know, this is my feelings, maybe I'm wrong.
I suppose for me it comes into two films: the regulated assets, which is a space that we work in, versus maybe those that are not. And I think the question there maybe is more around, should things like crypto be more closely regulated or regulated to a greater level, so there is clear definition associated with the risk that an investor is taking associated with that.
I think that is a very good point.
I think, like it or not, crypto is here, and it's an unregulated space, and it's an exciting space, and those two things are, quite a dangerous combination. It's absolutely a kind of a valid instrument, and I think that's been proven by the kind of the amount of people piling into it and the kind of movement that we see. But because it is unregulated and because it is new, then my view is yes, there will need to be new technologies. Technologies in terms of making exchanges liquid and safe. Regulatory requirements and regulatory governance, which also needs to be then integrated into the text to support it. So yes, I think we're in a new arms race there, and I think kind of watch the space on that one.
I think in that space is actually the Bank for International Settlements. They created the RIO project, but they are looking actually at the real data for the foreign exchange market. But one of the idea I think is behind this is actually to implement that for like markets which are having crypto assets or cryptocurrencies which create the crypto assets. So I think it's we have a few seconds left. I have one question. Is gamification an important way to encourage customers to engage with investing?
Potentially.
That was great. There's 17 seconds left. Succinct to the point. Look, I think there was a great point made by, I think it was Cara from, might have been Mercer this morning, and I think it's a great tool to get the younger generation, more engaged, because it plays more to, it resonates more with them, and I think anything that can get them more interested, more engaged, has got to be a good thing.
And thank you very much for this lovely discussion. It was a pleasure, and I hope we added some value added to the whole summit today.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.